It's common knowledge that our society creates stereotypes for groups of people. But too often we miscalculate the damage that these stereotypes can do. We brush them off and say, oh, just be yourself, like it's that easy. The truth is, when these expectations are extreme enough, it can be almost impossible to fight against them. If someone is treated every day like there's something evil and dangerous, chances are they're going to believe it.
Wow,
So
what
they
an
really
important
blame
scene.
them for the
You really
dangerous
learn
crimes
about
they
the way
commit.
Bigger has always
To
been
find
taught
out,
that
let's
he's
take a look at
inferior
the
to
life of
white
Bigger's
privileged
hobbies
people.
in Richard Roy's
It's
novel.
almost a
Native
sad
Son.
scene because Bigger and Gus have
The novel
it
opens
burned
in the
into their
one-room
minds
home
that
of Bigger
they
and his
can't do
family.
the same things
Bigger's
that,
mom notices a rat in the flat,
Plain also
and after
seems
a
like
short
a sign of
panic,
freedom
Bigger
for
kills the
girls.
rat with a pear.
It really stood out to me how
Later,
Bigger
Bigger walks into the poolroom, where he meets the rest of his gang. They plan a robbery, but are afraid to rob a white man for the first
The
time.
boys are speaking to the
Jack
fact
and
that
Bigger
white
proceed
people
to
have
go
the freedom
to a
do what they
movie,
want,
still
but they
feeling
don't have to
feeling
do
fearful about the planned robbery.
Also, Bigger's
When Bigger
fate has
returns
always
to the
been
pool room,
predetermined
he
by
attacks
white people.
Gus, who had correctly accused him of being afraid.
yeah, it's almost like Bigger has never even had the freedom.
A
and
few
the
hours
plane
later,
represents
Bigger
the
walks to
freedom.
the Dalton house, ultimately accepting
Overall, I
the
feel
job
like
of their
this scene was a
chauffeur.
very good job of
While the
showing
Daltons
the way
act
Bigger
kindly
and
to
Gus
Bigger,
felt
he is
trapped
intimidated
by the
and made
predetermined
uncomfortable by them.
fate white people have
He
crafted.
becomes more uneasy when Mary
Seeing
Dalton
the plane
enters the room,
is the
asking
sad
Bigger if
reality
he
that the
is
boys
part of a
accepted
union.
long ago, and they don't have
Later
the
that
same
night,
opportunities
Bigger
as
is
the white
directed by
privileged
Mary
boys.
to drive her
The
past
scene
school
is
and
where
instead
they
go
really
to pick
show
up her
them,
boyfriend
like,
and
this
fellow
is how they've
communist.
always felt.
Afraid to lose his job, Bigger goes against the
It's a
orders
really
of Mary's
eye-opening
parents
scene.
and drives to Jan's office. Bigger is then told by Jan to go
Okay,
to
that's
one of
good.
those
Okay,
places
suffocation
where
scene.
colored
Talk, Jack.
people eat. Bigger, throughout the night, feels very uncomfortable and perhaps almost disturbed with Mary and Jan's friendliness to him.
Bigger drives Jan and Mary around more, and Mary becomes so drunk that when Jan departs for the night, Mary cannot walk up to her bedroom. Bigger carries her into her bedroom and, not being able to resist the temptation, kisses her. Before Bigger can leave the dark room, the door opens and Mrs. Dalton, Mary's blind mother, walks in. Bigger is petrified. Mary begins to mumble, and, afraid of being caught, Bigger pushes a pillow into her face to silence her. Mrs. Dalton continues forward, smells the alcohol, and leaves, not sensing Bigger in the room. Bigger then removes the pillow from Mary, only to realize that he has suffocated her accidentally. In panic, he takes her body and burns it in the furnace, cutting off her head in the process. He then pulls the coal lever, and leaves for the night. When he gets home, he falls asleep in 5 minutes.
The next morning, Bigger goes back to the Daltons, acting as if nothing had occurred. Soon enough, though, the Daltons begin to worry, and Mr. Dalton calls Britton, a private detective. Britton interrogates Bigger accusingly, trying to scare him into admitting to the crime. Bigger has conjured up a fake story he could tell to cast blame away, and he repeats this to Britton. Bigger leaves the Daltons and plans to capitalize on the missing Mary by writing a ransom note, which he slips under the Daltons' door. When Mr. Dalton reads the note, he contacts police and reporters show up at the home. With all the reporters standing around watching, Bigger is ordered to shovel out the furnace, and in a short moment of chaos and smoke, one of the journalists finds the bone remains of Mary and one of her earrings. Bigger quickly leaves the house.
Bigger goes straight to Bessie and confesses everything. When Bessie and Bigger flee to an abandoned building together, Bigger rapes Bessie. Hours later, when Bessie is asleep, Bigger realizes he has to kill her and beats Bessie with a brick before throwing her down into an air shaft. Bigger leaves the building and runs around throughout the city. He reads newspapers updating him on the pursuing chase and overhears fellow black people talking about him. He is ultimately caught after a dangerous chase on the rooftop of a building and dragged down the stairs.
Bigger, now in prison, does not eat or drink for a few days. Jan visits him and says that he has forgiven Bigger, despite Bigger's having tried to cast the blame on Jan. Jan offers Bigger a lawyer, Mr. Max. Mr. Max talks for a few hours with Bigger about what has happened, and Bigger begins to understand himself and his surroundings for the first time ever. The trial comes and the prosecution attacks Bigger relentlessly, calling him a cold-blooded murderer. Then Mr. Max gives his speech, making enlightening arguments to why Bigger's upbringing and living conditions have led to this series of horrible crimes. Still, in just 1 hour of deliberation, the judge sentences Bigger to death. He talks to Max one last time, and it appears as if Bigger has finally understood his crimes, his society, and himself.
Buddy, get over here. It's a rat. Ah!
Oh
Get it, Bigger. Get it. Put it in the box so you can kill it. Roxy.
Oh my gosh!
Kill it.
Oh, they get so darn big!
Well, at first glance, this seems like a pretty straightforward scene.
It's really not. The rat scene symbolizes the predator-prey relationship that encapsulates Bigger throughout the book as he's being hunted and attempting to escape from the oppression of the white people. Just like the rat is being hunted and attempting to escape Bigger.
Yeah, I feel like the rat's panic and fear is similar to the panic and fear that Bigger experienced throughout the novel and how he tried to mask it through all the violence.
I agree. By showing its fangs and ripping Bigger's pants, it is similar to Bigger's violence throughout the book because of how fear and panic drove him to violence.
You're right, Bigger beat up Gus because he didn't want to rob Blum, killed Bessie because he didn't want her to burden him or betray him, and killed Mary out of panic because he didn't want to be caught with Mrs. Dalton in a room with her.
Yeah, it's all similar to how the rat attempted to bite Bigger and ended up ripping his pants. I think that the rat entering the room, becoming scared of this new place, and ultimately being killed is really similar to Bigger's experience in the Dalton household, unfortunately, because he becomes scared of the strange white world and the bizarre kindness of the Daltons that causes him to inflict violence, and he kills Mary because of it.
I think Bigger's own actions in the scene, such as killing the rat, are similar to the white people's throughout the book. They kill Bigger out of fear because they fear him, just like how Bigger killed the rat out of fear to ensure his safety and his family's.
Yeah, overall, in the rat scene, the rat is symbolic of Bigger because of the similar situation that it finds itself in. Both the rat and Bigger are attempting to elude death and are fearful of the new world that they have found themselves in and inflict violence upon others because of this fear, ultimately resulting in their death.
Yeah,
That's a
I
good
agree.
point.
yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Interesting scene.
Look,
What?
that plane up there flying.
You can hardly see it.
Looks like a little bird.
Them white boys sure can fly.
Yeah, they get a chance to do everything.
Yeah.
I could fly one of them things if I had a chance.
Yes, sir. If you wasn't black and you had some money and they let you go to aviation school, you could. Wow, what an important scene.
Yeah.
You really learn about the way Bigger has always been taught that he is inferior to white privileged people.
Yeah, it's almost a sad scene because Bigger and Gus have had it burned into their minds that they can't do the same things that white people can.
Yeah, the plane also seems like a sign of freedom for the boys.
And it really stood out to me how Bigger specifically said that only white men get a chance to fly planes. That line kind of broke my heart. You really see his lack of opportunity.
Yeah, the boys are speaking to the fact that white people have the freedom to do what they want, but they don't have any freedoms at all.
Also, Bigger's fate has always been predetermined by white people, and I think it also shows that too.
Yeah, it's almost like Bigger has never even had the freedom, and the plane represents the freedom that he wishes he had.
Overall, I feel like this scene does a very good job of showing the way Bigger and Gus have felt trapped by the predetermined fate white people have crafted for them. Seeing the plane is the sad reality that the boys accepted long ago, and they don't have the same opportunities as the white privileged boy. And I feel like this scene is where they really show the reader that, like, this is how they've always felt and this is how they continue to feel.
Yeah, it's a really eye-opening scene.
Yeah.
Mary, are you back? I can hear you mumbling, but where are you? Mary, are you in here? Oh, here you are. You stink of whiskey! Mary, you're drunk. How could you? What's going on? But I can't hear you anymore. You must be asleep. You're drunk. Good night. Oh.
She's dead. She's dead.
Wow, what an action-packed scene. You can really see all the fear and confusion that Bigger has. And since it's a very important part of the book, because the whole book kind of revolves around what... Can I start over?
Yeah. Okay. Take two.
No, you don't have to restart.
And three.
Okay. Wow, what an action-packed scene. You can really see all the fear and confusion that Bigger has. And this is a very important part of the book, obviously, because the whole book revolves around the decisions that Bigger makes in this scene.
It's really interesting how Bigger feels like he has to cover up all the evidence. It might have been better for him just to leave Mary in her bed and just leave.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. This part's very important to the book, and there are a lot of confusing things that happen. I think the reason that Bigger had felt the need to cover up Mary was because if Mrs. Dalton had found him as a black person, he would probably be accused of some sort of sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that Bigger just keeps digging himself into a deeper hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was also interesting how it was Mrs. Dalton to walk into the room because she is blind and she can't see Bigger, but she can smell the alcohol and she might be able to hear him. And that's what makes him so scared. That's what makes him so desperate. The fact that she might be able to hear him instead of like seeing him.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because the title of book 1 in Native Son is fear, and so it's kind of almost predictable in a way that Bigger would be afraid and ultimately make bad decisions because of that fear.
Yeah. Overall, I feel like this scene really sets Bigger up for the rest of the book and shows two major themes of fear and confusion.
Yeah, I agree.